Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Shadowcast. Today, with me, I have Chris.
Hi.
We also have Geordie,
Hello, how there?
and our special guest this week is Sarah Pilkington.
Hi,
Nice to see you, Sarah.
good to see you all.
Today, we're going to be talking about the Owlman, who was perhaps originally seen in Cornwall. But first of all, before we talk about the Owlman, Sarah, could you just introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, my name's Sarah. I'm a member of ASAP, the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomenon. Have been for quite a number of years, but I've always had a fascination with the paranormal, which I go back to a 1970s TV program called Tiswas, which
yes.
some people may remember, where they started doing just a little section on paranormal stuff. And I remember them talking about the devil's hoof prints in that was in Devon, and they talked about Spring-Heeled Jack and a few other ones, and that just like kind of piqued my interest. So it was probably from the age of about 12, something like that. So I'm interested in stuff like, the usual stuff like hauntings, UAPs, all that sort of stuff. But I found I've got an increasing interest in cryptids, particularly British cryptids, because we don't seem to give them a sort of a fair crack of the whip, I don't think. I think a lot of people know, apart from Nessie, everyone knows about Nessie, but I think compared to other countries around the world, we don't do as much for sort of celebrating them. So, sorry, I'll shut up now. I can go on for ages.
Please go on for ages. Just while we're on that topic, a question that I was going to ask you towards the end, but it seems appropriate to ask it now. Why do you think we don't really celebrate British cryptids?
It's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's something about the culture in the United Kingdom. So a lot of cryptids, when you look at them through history, so things like leaving sort of Nessie aside, when you've got things like kelpies, which sort of hang out in sort of lakes and water, black shuck, the afanc, which is like a equivalent Welsh water beast. There's an awful lot of UK cryptids which are linked to bodies of water and warnings to keep away from them. There's also things like sort of cryptids that we have that are sort of around our connection with the land and sort of folklore around that and how to ensure good harvests. And I think that kind of influences the way that, well, they were intended to, those stories were intended to influence the way that we interact with the natural landscape. And I think, sadly, we've kind of become more and more divorced from the natural landscape in a way that perhaps other countries haven't. Because if you look at the cryptids in, say, like America, a lot of the ones where you've got a sort of an ongoing sort of celebration of those, so things like the Jersey Devil, the swamp lizard guy, the Fresno Nightclaw, all that sort of stuff, they're in places which are quite kind of rural. And I think that it's something to do with the fact that those kind of traditions have carried on. In the UK, we're not great outdoors people anymore. And I think that's part of it. I don't think we're so much of an agricultural society anymore. Also, as well, I think the role of tourism. Tourism tends to be very much focused on places, and a nice place you can go for a walk, a nice place for a swim, your ice cream by the sea, all that sort of stuff. We don't really celebrate our cryptid kind of heritage in the UK to anything like the same degree. So I kind of feel it's sad, really, that we're sort of losing that. I think there is a bit more of a resurgence in, particularly in interest around folklore. There seems to be a lot more younger people that are sort of getting involved in things like Morris dancing and sort of May Day celebrations, all that sort of stuff. So it'd be interesting to see whether we start to see a bit more of a rise in interest in sort of UK cryptids.
Definitely. Yes, that's a fantastic answer. And I would agree with what you say about a resurgence in an interest in the natural world,
Mm.
particularly amongst younger people, and maybe an interest in alternative pagan religions as well,
Yeah,
such as Druidry.
yeah, and I think, as I said, that for me, a lot of these stories, when you kind of get down to the heart of them, um, there's a lot of commonality with urban legends, and urban legends are about creating a kind of social warning for people, and don't do this, don't go there. If you do, something terrible will happen. They're akin to do you remember the 1970s public information, 1970s and 80s public information films where you kind of, I remember there was one like a kid that's running on a beach and then there's a broken bottle and, all this kind of horrific stuff. And UK cryptids kind of served that sort of purpose maybe 100 years ago, where it was a warning to keep away from places that were unsafe as well. So I guess we've just become maybe a bit more cynical about the dangers in the natural world, and probably, again in the UK, they're not really as relevant in the same way. The places where they do tend to persist tend to be places like in Wales. There's a lot of sort of talk about cryptids. I'm trying to remember what they're called. It'll come back to me in a minute. But there's like almost like little dwarf creatures that live in mines. Or there's ones as well that hang out on mountain passes, and it's places where actually it would still be really dangerous to go. So again, that kind of built-in warning still makes sense.
Oh, hello.
So, and I
Mm.
know what you mean about those public information films. They were the stuff of nightmares, weren't they?
They were.
Mm.
You didn't go anywhere near a pylon with a kite after seeing some of those.
No, indeed. Lovely. So at this juncture, I wonder if you can give us a flavour of the legend of the Owlman of Morn Smith.
So it's Morn Smith is a very, very small village down in Cornwall. If you know the geography at all, it's just kind of, it's on the bottom edge of Cornwall, just to the right of the estuary of the Helston River. So it's quite a bleak place. Lots of sort of twisted trees on the cliff tops, and I guess probably the most famous sighting, which sort of kicked it all off, was in the 1970s. There were two young girls who were holidaying with their family, and they were kind of exploring the churchyard and the area around it. And it was sort of, it was a long summer's day. The description, if you read their account, it's really sort of, it's very detailed. They talk about how, and they had a really sort of long day, and it started to get dark, but they were still wanting to explore. So they went looking around this churchyard, and Morn Smith churchyard is quite interesting anyway, because it's got the remnants of some sort of old earthworks in there. They're not complete, because unfortunately some of them have been destroyed with building work around the church, and also with graves as well. But it's quite an atmospheric churchyard, and there's also the churchyard borders onto some woods, and they talked about sort of how they'd spent some time in the churchyard, and then they go into the woods, and they encounter this creature who they describe as being sort of human-sized up in one of the trees. And at the same time, they notice this what they describe as a sound of static around them, this sort of hissing static sound. And they look up into the tree and they see this absolutely enormous creature. And as they sort of almost make eye contact with this, it takes off, and they describe it as taking off almost vertically, that it just goes sort of straight up out of the tree and disappears out of sight. But another feature that they notice is that it's got feet that they describe as being like blacksmith's pincers. And if you look at the drawings that they did at the time, it's something that really stands out in the drawing is that you've got this kind of head that goes into shoulders, and then these long legs that are hanging down with these like sort of two huge claws on the bottom. I think it was probably the claws that absolutely terrified the girls. And they went running back to their parents, and the parents had the good sense to say to them, write it down, do a drawing. So we've got really good detailed contemporaneous reports. And there was a chap who lived sort of locally, who was very interested in the paranormal, called Doc Shields. And he had been asking people to get in touch with strange accounts, because there'd been quite a bit of strange stuff that was going on in the sort of the Cornish Peninsula in the 1970s. And that led to the girl's account being published. And I think probably from that led to more witnesses sort of subsequently coming forward. All of the witnesses described this owl-like creature that looks like, they describe it as being sort of an owl man, that it's so big, its wings are so huge that it sort of has the size of a human, and it's sort of moving silently, having glowing red eyes, and again, this kind of hissing static sound seems to accompany all of its appearances.
Thank you very much. So, before I ask a couple of questions, Chris, would you have any immediate questions for Sarah?
Yeah,
Maybe based on the appearance of this creature?
yeah. Sarah, do you think it's related to the Mothman?
It has a lot of commonality with the Mothman, and probably, I mean, it would be probably within living memory. I'm trying to think. Mothman was 1960s, wasn't it? Was it
60s and 70s?
Yeah. So sort of the girls that sort of this initial encounter were sort of in their early sort of 12, 13. So may have been aware of the accounts of Mothman, but it's this idea of this kind of creature that doesn't necessarily interact with the witnesses, that people see it, they have this sense of presence. That's something that comes across really strongly in witness accounts of both Mothman and the Owlman, is this kind of sense of presence. The witnesses being aware that they were being watched in some way, and then sort of being aware of this creature that just sort of made no sense. Other commonalities are this thing that about it appearing to all witnesses around sort of twilight time, which kind of makes sense because that's when moths and owls are around.
Definitely moths.
And they're not behaving out of character in that sense. They also talk both Mothman and Owlman have got these red eyes, this sort of description. And again, if you look at the drawings, it's this thing where you've got like a head with no shoulders that kind of goes out into these absolutely gigantic wings. So there is some similarity in terms of appearance, behavior as well, because as I said, neither of them really interact with the witnesses. It's almost like it's a sort of a fleeting glimpse of something, and it's almost like Mothman and Owlman are more scared of the witnesses than the witnesses are of them. Although they talk about being really sort of scared, the behaviour of both cryptids is sort of indicative of them being scared of the encounter. And it's almost like rather than Mothman or the Owlman appearing to people, it's like they stumble across it, and the cryptid kind of responds by just getting out of there as quickly as possible. I think it's, that if you're thinking about sort of the time of what was going on culturally in the world and sort of in history and politics, it was a time of sort of great uncertainty. There was a kind of a sort of a great deal of unease around sort of the Cold War. You were talking about sort of economic downturns in both countries. So the sort of the context for both sort of feels quite similar as well.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked, if it's related to it is because it could also be from another universe, because we spoke to a guy a couple of years last year or 2 years ago called Jonathan, and he said there's a portal in one of the woods in Forest Dean Woods, and it could have come through the portal, and the portal could be open, and it's come through, and that's what it could be. It could be like the Mothman going through the portal being at the church. You know what I mean? So,
it could be the same creature. Yeah, I mean, they as I said, when you look at sort of drawings, I think the only difference that I see between the two is that Mothman doesn't seem to have those claws. But it could be because it's when Mothman is flying, you don't see the claws, yeah, who knows? I mean, it's a really interesting discussion whether if it's a real creature, is it a time slip? Is it, as you said, it's something from another dimension? Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons I find it so fascinating, because when I first read the accounts, I was like, well, it's obviously an owl, isn't it? It's literally an owl.
Yeah.
But actually, when you dig into it a bit deeper, there's stuff that really doesn't quite make sense and isn't so easily explained.
Yeah, another question I just want to ask: does it ever leave Cornwall? Because it just stays in that place, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah, it's incredibly geographically bound. And I think, again, this is what makes it so interesting in terms of paranormal research, is that it's temporarily, geographically, it's a very, very small window. You're talking about sort of late 1970s through to sort of early 1980s. There are some other, there's some first account, I think, was 1926, and there's been some again towards the end of the 20th century. But generally, it's within a very sort of tight time span, very, very specific location. And you've also got these very detailed first-hand accounts from witnesses that were sort of written very shortly after what they'd seen, which should make it really easy to research. But then again, it just seems to have disappeared. And you think, well, if it was an animal, if it was something that was living there, we should have seen more of it by now.
That's what I'm just saying. I'm just wondering if any investigators have actually gone down there to investigate to see if they could get a good picture of it or something like that.
Yeah. No, it doesn't seem to be. Again, it comes back to this thing about why don't we celebrate British cryptids? Because if you look at the number of people that will, hauntings or UAPs, unexplained aerial phenomenon, those kind of things being their special area of interest, loads of people out there. Cryptids doesn't get so much. I mean, I'm a subscriber to 14 Times, have been for many years. Cryptids don't get that much of a look in there. It tends to be, a short page. So I think it's just something that doesn't sort of fire people up as much. Maybe the location puts people off because it's not an easy place to get to. It's, down those traditional Cornish lanes where you right down. You have to hope that no one's coming the other way. I don't know if that puts people off.
Yeah, I've drove down the Cornish.
I know what that's
like. Praying it doesn't come the other way.
I've driven down the Cornish lanes. I don't like them as well. Just one more question. Has anyone ever seen what kind of diet it would eat? Would it eat like mice and rodents and that? Do you think?
The fact it's hanging around a churchyard suggests. I mean, owls do. It depends what sort of owl. It's a hybrid of or whatever it is. I mean, the owls are hunters. They tend to be crepuscular, so they're around at twilight. It tends to be rodents, small mammals even. I mean, one of the possible culprits, as an explanation, if you're looking at a biological explanation, I would say would be a Eurasian eagle owl, which are, they talk about this sort of height. They're big creatures. They can take small deer. So they tend to be, they're not so much carrion feeders. They do tend to take live prey. And churchyards are places where you get lots of rodents, small creatures, those kind of things.
Because I'm just saying if it must have, because it's weird how it's like seen from like the 1920s then to the 1970s or something like that. Yeah. How long has it lived for? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And again, it's this thing which for me I come back to is that if it's just a biological creature, well, if it's something that's escaped, like a Eurasian owl, Eurasian owls wouldn't cover that time span. So it would have to be 2 Eurasian owls that have just happened to escape in a very, very small geographical location. So is there somebody nearby that's keeping Eurasian owls and accidentally let 2 slip 50 years apart. To me, that just seems like, Occam's razor stuff. It just seems a bit strange. Is it about a Eurasian eagle owl that's come over like a summer visitor? Well, there's no patterns to suggest that. And something like that, I mean, bird watchers, if a rare bird appears, word gets out on the grapevine, everybody invades that area, they're looking for it. Sorry, I've forgotten my drift now, where I was going. Remind me your question again.
No, I'm just saying, if it does, so I'm trying to think.
It was about that time span, wasn't it?
The time span. Yeah, I'm trying to say, from the time span, if like it's not been seen since the 20s and now it's been seen in the 70s. No, how long does it live for? That was the question.
That can't be one owl. It's got to be more than one. And again, the fact that it just seems to, you then get another sort of gap of about 15 years before you get another little cluster of sightings. So there's something there about this creature that kind of pops in and out of awareness.
Yeah.
Which again is quite interesting, as because if you're looking at natural explanations, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
If it was a bird, even if it was just a summer visitor, it would be there regularly. People would be seeing it regularly.
Yeah. But there's one more question I've just got to ask him. Apparently, it's attacked two boys as well. Two boys were playing in the churchyard, and it attacked one of them, and the other boy got the stick and hit it. And it went off, but I don't know. I know it ran away or something like that. That's one thing. I'm wondering if it's attacked anyone else.
The 1926 sighting. Allegedly it attacked somebody then, but again they poked it with sticks. I mean, what's it going to do? So it comes across very much as a creature that is quite shy, and if it's interacting with humans, it's by accident. It disappears off. It doesn't chase them. It doesn't apart from this kind of hissing noise, it doesn't seem to want to make its presence known at all, and like that hissing noise, I mean, that in itself is interesting. I mean, do you want me to talk a bit about that?
You could do, yeah.
Because again, like thinking about natural explanations, because I kind of, the way I work is like, okay, so what's the most logical explanation? The most logical explanation is this is a flesh and blood creature that has been misinterpreted in terms of size, probably, which if you're a young kid and something flies at you, you probably are going to be like, my God, it was massive, particularly if it goes right in front of your face. The hissing thing, though, owls do hiss. They hiss when they're frightened. They hiss to as a warning. So yeah, that would fit in with a biological creature. But then I sort of went back to this thing that actually a lot of the witnesses, when they talk about the hissing sound, they describe it as like a sound like static.
Yeah.
And that started me down a road of thinking about things like any gamers amongst you, if you remember the original Silent Hill, that one of the things that signaled that there was something iffy around was that you got this static noise that sort of started playing over the radio that you were carrying. There's also things like there's an absolutely brilliant YouTube series called Marble Hornets, which is I won't spoil it, but it's worth checking out. It's brilliant, but it's got like a paranormal element to it. And again, when this particular sort of creature appears, you get this static sound. It also kind of things like EVP, that you have to have that static sound in the background to be able to hear it. So it made me think, like, from a paranormal perspective, is this something about a creature that actually the static sound is about creating a sort of liminal state for the witnesses that makes their consciousness more open to something being there? And again, thinking about if this is something that's coming through a portal, is that static sound the sound of the portal opening? Is it about this kind of change in state, sort of physical state, that's what you're actually hearing, the static sound? So I think that to me is one of the elements that I think when people look at the accounts, it's very easy to dismiss it as, oh, it's just a creature making a noise. And I actually think it's probably more than that. Because again, witnesses talk about a sense of feeling threatened, feeling on edge when they hear this static sound. And it's almost like that is the precursor to them actually seeing the Owlman himself.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that, Sarah. Lee, back to you.
Yes, just before we hear from Geordie, just going back to the hissing sound, are we aware of the presence of any pylons in the vicinity?
No, not there's nothing that would account for sort of static electricity noises. It is an incredibly windswept sort of peninsula. The only thing that is it about you get what's it called, susurration. You get that noise from leaves in the wind that can be sort of, potentially it could be something like that. But reading the accounts of witnesses, they talk about this suddenly this hissing noise, like kind of hissing static sound, like sort of suddenly being aware on the edge of their consciousness and then it building, and then they see the Owlman. So again, in terms of straightforward explanations, you could argue wind in the trees, it's an owl making a hissing noise. However, it seems to be a really integral part of the experience, more so than it just being something that could be explained through something that you're hearing naturally.
Fantastic. Geordie, could we have
Hello.
2 questions from you?
Yeah, just on the owl being possibly a Eurasian owl, European owl. When it's resting, the owl, its wings are flat down and not open.
Yeah.
When it's resting, so the only connection I've got really is the feet. If they saw the feet first,
yeah.
But when it's resting, it doesn't have its wings wide, and it would very rarely put them wide unless once in a while in the evening. Well, so do you really think it could be an owl? Because I really disregard that just about fully.
The things that would be consistent with it being an owl, hissing sound, it being sighted at sort of twilight, and the feet, the drawings of the feet, these like sort of pincer-shaped feet, are almost identical. The Eurasian eagle owl has actually got they've got like 3 toes at the front and 1 at the back, but when it's in flight, the way its feet sort of hang, it almost looks as though it's just got these sort of 2 claws. When it's taking, obviously as it's taking out, it would put its wings out. And it's got, again, the drawings, you see these 2 little tufts at the top of the head of the Owlman, which is kind of consistent.
It's the height thing really for me, 3 foot and 5 foot. Do people hear the hissing still in the village?
The local people are very much don't go down to Mornham Woods. There's something strange going on down there.
Is it worth an investigation?
I think I would love to go down there. I have to say, it's on my list. It's on my bucket list of places to go to, because I listened. There's a podcast called Folkways, and I specifically listened to it because the woman talked about the Owlman, and she went to Mornham Woods, and she said that as soon as you walk in there, she said it's a really eerie, strange place.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it's, and again, if you're thinking about, well, why isn't it seen very often? Potentially it is, again, because it's not a place where you would naturally want to take your dog for a walk. It's an isolated location. You wouldn't, I think it's only the local people that are going to be going there would know that it was there to sort of get to, I guess. There's no reason really for tourists to be going down there, because unless you've got a particular interest in the sort of the earthworks in the church, I think it's a place worth visiting.
It's worth a documentary.
Yeah, I think so. As I said, I feel really sad that our British cryptids aren't celebrated.
Well, I might be interested in doing one possibly, because I did one in Sumatra 3 years ago called Sumatra Monster, which is on Blue TV. I did that one, and that was my first one. But I think there's quite a bit of content there and substance, what I've seen so far, that might be worth going down there.
And actually as well, sort of going back to what does the Owlman eat, if you want to spread your net a bit wider, in the 1970s in Cornwall, there were mutilations of animals at the nearby zoo. which were very strange. They were a lot of them decapitated. They didn't find the heads, and absence of blood, considering what had happened. And that was never really satisfactorily explained. You'd also got at the same time the beast of Exmoor, which was
I know a bit about that.
Yeah. I'm a bit, I have to say, I don't want to offend anybody, but when it comes to the big cats, I'm kind of like, those are real. We know they're real. They've found DNA evidence now to prove that. So I kind of put those to one side a little bit. You'd also got the accounts of things like the hairy hams in where was that? That's
Dartmoor.
Plymouth. Yeah. There was the Morgor. There was the sea monster that was seen just off Falmouth, which isn't that far away from Helston. So there was a lot of strange stuff going on. But I think the sort of the animal killings at the zoo are quite interesting, given that you've got this potentially this huge apex predator not that far down the road, where if you go sort of as the owl flies, as it were.
Yeah.
I'm up for it.
There was a video, wasn't there? Someone, I think it was the two guys in 1995 or 89. But I don't know if that was a hoax. Did you see that one?
I've not seen that one. Is that on YouTube?
Yeah, I think it could be. Yeah, I was just looking at a document the other day, but I'm sure it's on there. Yeah, I'm not sure if it was 89 or 95, but there's not really been anything locally. Nothing just now. Nothing coming up. Nothing.
No. And as I said, it just seems like the people that witnessed it would still be around because they were only sort of in their early teens. The two women. I'm not sure how you would track them down. I expect that there'd be ways of doing it. But yeah, there's also like the contemporary newspaper reports, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think it's a rich seam yet to be mined.
Well, I'll have a think about that then, I think. Well, that's brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. For now.
Sarah, sorry, Geordie. Sarah, just a quick question. Where was this mutate lab, this mutate zoo exactly? Where was it?
It was Newquay, I think.
Newquay, was it? Oh.
Yeah. So just over the other side of the peninsula.
Oh, okay. It's just weird that they had the mutate zoo. I never knew about they had that.
Yeah, I have to say I didn't realise. It was only when I sort of did a bit of I mean, I'm not a massive expert in the Owlman by any way, shape, or form. There's people who've written books on him, but when I started doing a bit more of a deep dive into what was going on, it was really interesting. And again, I mean, Cornwall is somewhere where I feel they have got a much deeper connection with sort of folklore and
definitely.
They still do things like they've got the Helston furry dance, and there's the Obios thing and all that sort of stuff that goes on. So it kind of feels like it's a part of the country where people are more connected, and I mean, again, like folklore around owls. I know people are sometimes a bit twitchy about the idea of folklore when it comes to the paranormal, but I actually think, well, folklore is essentially early witness testimony and people trying to make sense of strange events. Owls have got a huge association with female goddesses like sort of Athena, Minerva. There's also there's a particular Welsh goddess, and I'm gonna have to remember it's what is it? Blue Ethwin, who was a young woman who was created out of flowers to be a god, the wife for a god. She didn't like that idea, so she transformed herself back into flowers, and as punishment, she got turned into an owl. And again, thinking about the connection with femininity and the Owlman, the majority of witnesses have been young women. So there's so many different directions that you could go in when it comes to kind of researching. And again, we're assuming it's an Owlman. Could it be an Owlwoman? We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. Yeah. Yeah, just another question. Like I said about the big black cats, the reason we know they're real is because people used to. I was speaking to a farmer a couple of years ago, and he said that a farmer down the road had 2 big black panthers, had a lynx, had everything.
Yeah.
So I know they've escaped from zoos, and they
released them.
Yeah, from the 1970s when people couldn't have a license. They released them. So what does it make that they could have had mutated animals at that time as well?
Yeah, exactly. Because it was around that time when they brought, as you said, they brought in that piece of legislation. You had to have a license. People were just letting them go. And, for years, it was this thing about, they used to call them alien big cats. I used to read Janet and Colin Board, Mysterious Country, which have got like all these cryptids, unexplained events, what have you. Crop circles are in there as well, and they were saying, "Oh no, well they're alien. They're not real. They're from another dimension." But actually, now we've got DNA evidence. I think it was was it in the Lake District that they took some DNA from a carcass that they'd found, and it's like, yeah, this is definitely it's a big feline.
Yeah, when we were speaking to a guy called Jonathan McGrove. He was telling me he was doing his badger thing, and the badger went off somewhere, and he looked around, and there was a big black cat, and it had all cubs and that with him. And he was like, "Well, this was back when he couldn't." He wanted to take a photo, but this is when he couldn't. He was just following this badger. He took the wrong turn, and he seen a big black thing with. So it wouldn't surprise me if that some other places have had mutated animals, and that's where the Owlman's come from.
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah, and it's an easy source of prey, isn't it? If he's got this like zoo on the doorstep, to be able to swoop in and take a couple of small deer or something.
Yeah. Okay, back to you, Lee.
Yes, just going back to the question of why the Owlman hasn't been seen that much. It's very strange, isn't it? John Downes, the renowned cryptozoologist, was saying to us a little while ago, the idea of this being a flesh and blood animal is completely absurd because it would have been seen a lot more than it has.
Yeah, and again, I think this is the thing, is that you have to keep such an open mind when you're dealing with anything to do with the paranormal in its widest sense, because it's so easy to go to that default position of, oh well, it's a flesh and blood animal, there's an obvious explanation. But actually, with a lot of these things, and I think my experience with sort of doing a bit of research around the Owlman is that the more you dig into it, yes, there's some superficial explanations, but when you look beyond the superficial, actually that doesn't make sense. And if it was flesh and blood, we should be seeing more of it. We should be seeing it should be a breeding pair at least. We should be seeing there should be regular sightings reported. There should be evidence of sort of larger mammals being taken as prey. That isn't happening, and we're talking about a countryside now which is increasingly inhabited. There are less places for these sort of cryptid creatures to hide if it is a flesh and blood creature.
I wonder if it might have some very strange practice when it comes to hibernation.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I think the other thing that I haven't talked about yet, which was the thing that kind of really blew my mind when I was looking into it, is in the early 1920s, there was a group of surrealist artists who were based down in Cornwall. One of whom is an artist called Max Ernst. He's quite famous. He did a surrealist painting called The Elephant Celebes, which is, I think, it's probably in the National Gallery. But he was really obsessed with sort of paranormal stuff, and he and a group of friends got together because they wanted to essentially create a tulpa, a thought form creature. And Max Ernst had got an alter ego who he called Lop Lop, which took the form of an owl. And this group got together to actually try and create Lop Lop as a thought form, as a tulpa. And he did a series of drawings of Lop Lop, where it's this kind of half owl, half human. It's got kind of human torso, owl head, owl wings going down into human legs. Oh my goodness, it sounds exactly like the Owlman. And yeah, I mean, what are the chances of that as well? Is you've got a bunch of surrealists just a few miles down the road actively trying to create a thought form creature that takes the form of half owl, half human, and then you start to get sightings.
Yeah.
Quite extraordinary.
Yeah, I think that were the occultists.
Yeah, well, they had links with the occult
with our friend Alistair Crowley.
I'm not sure if they were linked. I mean, all things go back to Alistair Crowley, don't they? I think, but
they do.
But they were definitely, they had occult connections, and yeah, it wasn't just a group of people messing around. They were quite serious about the idea of creating this creature, and again, it was about this kind of awareness of like sort of the power of nature, the forces of nature. Yeah. Cornwall is quite a liminal area of the country because it's land surrounded by sea. And again, this theme of liminality is something that sits so strongly around the Owlman, because it's seen at a liminal time of day between daylight and dusk. It's seen by sort of predominantly by young people who are kind of at that stage where they're not children but they're not quite adults. There's strong themes of folklore themes that kind of run through the legend. I mean, again, it's kind of, well, this is just more than somebody seeing a big owl out the corner of their eye.
No, I mean, there's no visual evidence, is there? Any other proof of it, really? Footprints or scats or anything like that being found?
No, and it's got to be nesting somewhere, and owls tend to, if you were saying it was a barn owl, which are the ones that tend to hang out,
you would have seen it, yeah.
Seen it.
Yeah, you would have seen something.
The other thing as well is that I mean, it wasn't the Owlman himself, but St. Morning Church, there's been some reports of like orbs and strange lights, what appear to be sentient lights moving around the tower as well. So there's strange stuff going on in that part of the country.
Definitely worth going down to see them, I think. I might do that in the future.
I'm quite interested. What I haven't looked into at all is the geology around there as to whether there's anything that, that would create, if there's fault lines or something that would kind of create earth lights or indeed portals. Or, you're looking into like piezoelectric effects from sort of rocks that have got a high quartz content. If they're under pressure, that those can kind of create some sort of strange effects as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on. Yeah,
excellent.
We're obviously not going to solve the mystery of the Owlman today, but I think it'd be useful at this point to establish what the actual options are. So my starter for 10 would be option number 1. This is a real flesh and blood animal. We've already touched upon that. Would anybody else like to offer a reason why that might be true?
I think the behaviour, the time it's seen, the general overall appearance initially suggests a flesh and blood creature. However, its persistence over time and the fact that it is seen so infrequently, it appears in clusters, to me says it's not.
What is the chance of it being a hoax? A fake?
Well, the thing, I mean, Tony Dockshield was famous for his hoaxes. He was well known, and that has been put forward as an argument. But I would like to know how he managed to hoax flying around in an owl suit. If it was just standing in a tree, wings out, hissing at people, scaring people, I'd say maybe. But it's been seen flying by witnesses.
And is it true the owl went straight up instead of going forward? See, owls would not do that. Owls would go forward.
Yeah,
they can't just go straight up, unfortunately. So that's a kind of red flag for me as well, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the witnesses, they talk about that they see it up in the tree and then it shoots up out of sight above the tree line, doesn't make a sound, doesn't flap its wings. Well, there's no bird that can do that.
No, not at all.
I was thinking, okay, from a if it's a real bird, how would you explain that? Well, was it that they're seeing it from underneath? Owls do take off and glide. Is that what they saw? And because they were seeing it from underneath, it looked like it went straight up. But actually, no, I don't think you would know the difference between something gliding over your head and going straight up through the tree line.
And it was quite dark at the time, or dusk.
Yeah.
So I mean, and their vision might be a bit blurred, and you don't really know for sure.
Yeah.
They could elaborate a little bit on it.
Yeah, and obviously the impact of fear. They talked about how scared they felt. That does have an effect on your memory, and your brain does tend to fill in blanks. However, the subsequent reports, are consistent. So if it is people filling in blanks, they're filling in the blanks consistently.
Yeah. I've got to get off in a minute, I'm afraid.
Okay.
But lovely speaking to you, Sarah. And
me too.
I'll add you on Facebook.
Yes, please. That'd be great. I'll have a fellow enthusiast.
I know Caroline quite well, by the way.
Yeah, she's down your neck of the woods, isn't she? No, she's not.
Well,
no. Owlman's down her neck of the woods.
we're quite good friends anyway. We've been working on something together. So lovely speaking to you. Lovely. Thanks a lot, Lee. Thanks a lot.
Geordie.
Chris.
Hey, Geordie.
We'll do one soon again, yeah?
Yeah.
We'll do one again soon, yeah?
We'll see you again soon.
See you again. Thanks a lot. Sorry now, I've got to go. Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.
So if we're looking at other explanations then, I mean, like as we've said, I don't think flesh and blood creature cuts it for me.
No.
The other two, I think time slip, is it a creature from another time that we're seeing? I don't think that explains it, because we're not aware of anything like that in previous time. Well, unless future times, I suppose it could be coming from, but it doesn't. What's described by witnesses doesn't seem to have the same sort of features of other time slips, because they're not aware of anything else in their surroundings changing. I personally think it's a thought form. I think it's a tulpa. I think Max Ernst did it. I think he created a creature that, when the conditions are right, manifests. And I think that's what that sort of the static sound building. I think that is about young. I'm going to sound like I'm really out there now, but I'm going to go with it, because to me, it's like, you've got young people on the cusp of puberty, adulthood, classic kind of paranormal poltergeist activity. That's when it happens. You've got people that it's people that see it are not on their own. It's two people together. They are people who are emotionally connected, and I think it's something about that combination of people, young people in that setting, that when the conditions are right, it manifests. I guess, and again, the reason why it's not seen so often is because it's not somewhere where people would go by accident. I think it's not an area that is necessarily particularly favoured by tourists. So I think it's that you just have to get the right conditions, the right people in the right place. I don't think it's necessarily that it's kind of appearing for them. I think it's just that it draws on their energies, their presence, to be visible just for that brief few moments. And I think as it's got further away from when it was first manifested, it's seen for briefer periods of time, because it's sort of its residual energy is dying away. That's my Owlman.
Like I say, if you visit the place, you might end up seeing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You never know, here.
Yeah.
Like you said, most people don't usually go there, but if like someone went down to investigate, they might see it one day, and that might.
Yeah. It would be good. I mean, I think I'm too old now for theoretically to be sort of Owlman's preferred choice, but yeah, I just think it's there's so many strange elements to it. So much strange history. I mean, if you go back into the history of the church, that's quite weird as well. And the earthworks that are in the churchyard, there just seems to be so many strange things coming together in one place. And again, if you're looking at sort of psychogeography, why people choose to build monuments in the same place. Why were those earthworks there in the first place? Why did people then build a church on top of it? There's obviously something about that place that people feel drawn to, and then something manifests itself there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to hear about the lights as well that have been seen at the church.
Yeah, they're described as like these sort of white orbs that are, and again, I know people always get a bit twitchy when you say orbs, but these are like balls of light moving around the tower, like sort of circling the tower, and also moving around the churchyard as well. So, what are the explanations for something like that? Well, it sounds like there's some sort of energy that is drawn to that area that at times is able to manifest, like I suppose like will-o'-the-wisp spook lights that you get in America. We have parallels here. It's just we don't seem to necessarily be so aware of them.
I think if there was an investigation to be held within the church grounds, I do like your idea that there could be a tulpa at play here, and therefore I would have thought if you had an investigation, it would involve trying to invoke this being, if that's the correct word, using the original drawings from Earth.
Yeah.
Say we are unfortunately beyond the age of being on the cusp.
Yeah.
Puberty.
Cusp of retirement, maybe it'll cut us some slack.
Yeah, closer to that,
yeah. But yeah, to me, I'm one of these people when my investigative mindset is always like you go through, you look at the obvious, and then you look at the facts, and do they match? Well, in this case, they don't. There is something more to it. And as I said, just there's so much strange stuff that goes on in Cornwall that I've only just scratched the surface looking at this. I think it's something that it's a missed opportunity for cryptozoologists not to be sort of diving into this a little bit more. So I'm certainly continuing my investigations into it, and at some point I will be down to St. Morning, drawings in hand.
I think that's what we should do as well, Leigh, investigate as well, because we investigate spooky stuff like that, don't we?
We do, and Geordie seems quite enthusiastic about the idea as well.
And as I said, I think for me, it's what makes it so fascinating for me is that it feels like if you got a Venn diagram and you took folklore, psychogeography, psychology, modern eyewitness testimony, and hoaxing as well with Tony Schultz, and you kind of overlaid them. Well, Owlman is right at the centre of all of that. So he's a fascinating figure.
We have about 5 minutes left. This has been a fantastic episode. Would you like to use that time to maybe share a paranormal experience that you may have had?
Yeah, I had a really strange experience. It's about 15 years ago. I went to a place called Llanthony Priory in Wales. It's an incredibly atmospheric place. It's the ruins of an old priory that has got like I don't know what it would have been originally. It's now a pub and hotel that's kind of like built into the ruins. And I went there, and it was for my birthday, and it was in January, and there was snow on the ground. And the room I was staying in, it was in this tower which is on the side of the building. No heating, and so I remember there's this huge sort of bed I got into, and the chap I was with at the time was absolutely freaked out by anything paranormal. And he said, like, if you hear anything strange in the night, don't wake me up. So at some point during the night, I woke up and I had this sensation, and I can only describe it as being like all the sound being sucked out of the room. Because, like, you know, normally in an old building, you kind of hear creaking and wind whistling and what have you. But it was like literally all of those sounds suddenly got sucked away. And then I heard this sound directly outside the door of the room. And it sounded like it was almost like two people were like wrestling with each other. It was like shoes scuffling on the stonework. And then I heard this kind of like almost like gargling, choking noise. And so I got out of bed, walked across the room, and just as I put my hand on the door handle, all of the sound flooded back into the room. And as I opened the door, there was nothing there. That I have never been able to explain, because I kind of think like hypnopompic, hypnagogic kind of stuff. The fact that I got out of the bed and it was a cold room, so it definitely woke me up. Walking across the room, and yeah, it was really strange, really strange. And I didn't wake him up because he would have been terrified.
So the sound stopped as soon as you got
Literally,
hold of
I put my hand on the door handle, and it was like this sort of like choking noise and the sounds of feet scuffling. To me, it sounded like somebody had got another person pinned up against the door by the throat, and the person's feet were scuffling on the stonework. And outside the door, it was like they call it the tower rooms, and it's like a sort of a spiral staircase. There is no way that anybody could have got out of sight between me opening the door, the sound stopping and the me opening the door. So that is, like I said, it's probably about 15, if not 20 years ago. I've never been able to explain that one, and it was so vivid. And I've been back there a couple of years ago now. I didn't stay in the same room, unfortunately, because it really struck me. It's an experience that's really struck me and has really stayed with me throughout my life as one that, do you know what, I cannot explain that one.
And had there been reports of anything similar happening in that room?
No, I asked about it, and they sort of said, oh yeah, you know, we get people saying they've heard and seen strange things. Nothing as specific as that. You know, I think any old building you get reports of like sort of hauntings and what have you. But I've never found, I haven't found an account that kind of matches that particular one. But as I said, it was the combination of this like all the sound around me disappearing, and then this sound of somebody being throttled outside the door fading in, and then equally just disappearing again. Very strange.
Yeah, so I wonder what you were hearing, something from the past maybe, or something from the future?
That's how I rationalised it, is that just for some sort of few seconds that I heard something that had happened in the past. And yeah, for whatever reason, there was just that overlap of being in the same place at the same time, you know, being in the same space as somebody where that had happened. And it was, I don't know, a residual energy, something that was still left there that I heard. And I've been to, you know, quite a few places that are reputedly haunted, like, you know, Ancient Ramin and, you know, all the classic ones. Never had an unsettling experience, but that was unsettling because it was so obviously the sound of somebody in distress.
And isn't it amazing that things always happen when you're not seeking?
When you don't expect them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I hadn't gone, you know, that wasn't the intention. We'd gone there because it was just a place I'd always wanted to visit. It's a beautiful part of the country. You can go over, there's a road called the Gospel Pass, I think it's called, where you go over the top of Hay Bluff. If you've got a fear for heights, it's not good. But it's, you know, it's a beautiful location. So, you know, the chap I was with at the time was not interested in the paranormal, and I was expressly forbidden from doing anything paranormal related when I was with him because he was so terrified. So it just seems strange that, you know, that was where I actually had something that to this day I can't explain.
Well, thank you very much for your wonderful contribution today, Sarah.
Thank you,
Good
Sarah.
to talk to you both.
Sarah Pilkington, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you on another edition of the Shadowcast. It's goodbye from Chris.
Bye.
And it's a goodbye from me. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you again sometime.